Hello, we are Eastern Standard Group 2. This is our behavior replication project. I'm Becca, and I'm going to control the technology portion of this presentation.
Hi, I'm Marissa.
I'm Ramsey.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Laura. And I'm going to go ahead and start us off by talking about the original study. So the original study that we chose to replicate is entitled Using Goal Setting and Feedback to Increase Weekly Running Distance, and it's by Wack, Crosland, and Miltenberger from 2014. So the purpose of this original study was to increase running distance amongst healthy adults through goal setting and performance feedback. The participants included 5 females. They were between the ages of 18 and 26, and they were all in good health. They didn't have any health issues that would lead them to be unable to run. That's fairly similar to our group. Our group is with participants from ages 24 to 31. No health issues, we were all able to run. They were all students in higher education, and they all volunteered to be a part of this study. It was part of a volunteer opportunity on campus. So the materials that they used for the study included a Nike sports band and sensor to track the distances ran by participants, as well as they needed access to a computer for video conferences. So the sports band is connected to an app, but it's pretty much like a Fitbit. It's kind of like a bracelet that they wore around their wrist so they could track their distances. Their research design was a multiple baseline across participants design, and their target behavior was running. And running was defined as anything that was faster than a brisk walk, which would be a speed that was at or above 4 miles per hour. Our group also targeted running at a speed of 4 miles per hour or higher. So we replicated that exactly. So the procedure for the study, it had a baseline and intervention sections for data collection. So during the baseline, all 5 participants, all 5 of the women, wore the Nike sports band for 2 to 4 weeks of running, but they did not set short or long-term goals. They simply ran and tracked their distances. So for those few weeks, each person during their individual baseline runs, they were just running. They tracked their distances and recorded them, but there were no goals being set, which was the major difference with baseline. And then the intervention set in. The intervention involved meeting with a researcher following baseline to set long-term distance goals and a short-term distance goal in that first meeting. So the researcher was the same person for all 5 participants, and that person was the person in charge of giving feedback to the participants and also helping with helping them set their short-term and long-term goals, kind of based on their running capabilities that were shown during baseline. So that long-term goal that's set during the first meeting, that was defined as the distance each participant wanted to run in a single running session by the end of the study. So after all the weeks of research that these participants were participating in, they all had a goal that they were hoping, by the end of this, I want to be able to run 3 miles in one stretch. So that's what that long-term goal was for. That short-term goal that they set in their first meeting was a weekly goal. So that happened at each meeting with the researcher from there on out. And that weekly goal would incrementally increase throughout the intervention period until reaching that long-term goal. So for example, if someone set their first weekly short-term goal as 1 mile, they met that goal by the next week, they might do 1.5 until they reach their long-term goal of 3 miles. So participants met with the researcher weekly via video conference, which is what we did as well. We did video conferences each week. And the researcher provided descriptive and visual feedback based on the participants' runs for the week. So that's where that feedback component comes in. They used the visual feedback was the data that they got from the app. So the app would track how far they ran. The researcher would pull up that data, take a look at it, and give feedback in that way. If participants met their short-term distance goal for the week, they would increase their short-term distance goal for the next week. So as I was saying, if they set their goal of 1 mile and they met it, then maybe that next week they would increase to 1.5. The results of the study found that all participants did increase their running distance goals through goal setting and feedback. So this research study showed that goal setting and feedback did work for these participants to help increase the distance of running for all of these girls. So now Becca is going to go ahead and start and talk about the supporting literature we have that kind of supports goal setting and feedback.
The first study explored the use of pedometers and predetermined criteria to increase steps. This study was by Sawchuk in 2019, and this study included 32 individuals who were aged 50 to 85, and they reported that they had a sedentary lifestyle. The intervention split both of the groups into a monitoring-only group, or MO, and a goal-setting group, or GS. Each group was given a pedometer and a diary to record their steps. And the goal-setting group had the intervention to increase their step count by 5% each week for 6 weeks total. The MO group was just told to increase their steps. The results were that the total number of steps in the goal-setting group across the 6 weeks period were higher, and the average amount of steps per day were also higher in the goal-setting group. In total, 40% of the time, the goal-setting group could increase their steps by 5%. The MO group also increased their weekly step count, though the goal-setting group had higher numbers overall. The next study was by Kren, Wirth, and Hergovich in 2013, and they used 413 students at the University of Vienna who were either sports science or psychology majors. And this intervention used the FIT model and positive and negative reinforcement to increase performance. So the FIT model is the feedback intervention model by Kluger and Denisi from 1996. And this is based on the theory that behavior is regulated by comparisons of feedback to goals or standards that are organized in a hierarchy. So the intervention for this program was each participant was asked to do a specific task 3 times. And this task was identifying a number of athletes in a sports clip. They weren't really told anything about the averages or how many athletes they should see. They were just told that they were going to watch a clip and identify a number of athletes. So the 2 conditions were receiving positive and negative feedback after each task. The negative feedback condition just told the participants that their performance was below average. And the positive feedback condition, the participants were told that their performance was above average. Again, they weren't given any sort of specific number to really compare it to their own performance. The results were that the participants raised standards for the most part, but there wasn't really a significant difference in progression of performance. However, participants that raised the standard after receiving positive feedback performed better. The next 2 studies are done by the same author, Schultz and Townsend. This first one is from 2012, and this involved 41 middle schoolers in a home economics course. And this intervention was designed to improve dietary and physical activity through guided goal setting. This intervention involved a program called Eat Fit, and this was 10 one-hour sessions that talked about self-efficacy, outcome expectations, self-regulation, fast food, breakfast food, food advertisement, and another variety of food-related topics, as well as exercise-related topics. And each student was told to set major and minor goals. A major goal could be something like eating more fruits and vegetables, and a minor goal could be something like eating an apple with breakfast. Results showed that significant changes in diet and physical activity occurred. Likewise, for this 2009 setting, this one's very similar, but this one had a control group, and this one involved 94 students, again, in a home economics class, and this one uses guided goal setting versus no goal setting. Each group was given a workbook with nutrition and fitness information, But the goal setting group also included a goal contract. They got to choose a goal tracker, and they also were rewarded for achieving goals. Both groups were taught the same 5 lessons about diet and physical activity, and they also took a questionnaire about their diet and physical activity. They were able to choose 1 diet and 1 physical activity goal. And in the end, 73 of participants from the treatment condition and 53% of participants from the control group improved on their diet goal, and 44 and 29% respectively on their physical activity goal. And finally, from LaFada 2013, this study involved 963 participants who had been to a primary physician or endocrinologist in the past 6 months. They also took baseline data from a hemoglobin test from the past year. The intervention aimed to increase trust towards physicians, self-management, and competency about one's own health. The study used the PASIC, which is the Patient Assessment of Chronic Illness and Care. They were asked to talk about goals, set specific goals, and set a goal to improve diet and exercise. And all of those 3 points were each of the participants rated how often that type of conversation occurred with their physician on a scale of 1 to 5. So if it didn't really happen that often, maybe it would be a 1 or a 2. But if every time they saw their primary physician, they were talking about goal and diet, it would be ranked a 5. They were also asked to rate their trust in their physician on a scale of 1 through 7. The results showed that the participants trusted physicians more, they set goals and improved glycemic health, and 41% of respondents classified themselves as having a higher competence regarding their health. Next, Marissa is going to discuss the purpose of our project.
So the purpose of our study is to evaluate the use of goal setting and performance feedback to increase running distance amongst healthy adults. Running distance was particularly targeted due to the research benefits of regular exercise for adults. Next up, Elizabeth will discuss the methods of our project.
I'm going to discuss about the participants, the setting and materials, behavior definition and data collection, research design, baseline and treatment phases, IOA, and treatment integrity. For participants, the participants were 5 females, ages 24 to 31 years of age. They were in good health and did not have any conditions that would possess health risks. For the settings and materials, the participants ran outdoors around their neighborhood and indoors at the YMCA running track. For materials, the materials included the Nike Run Club phone app, the Map My Run phone app. We used phones, iPhone or Android, a computer, data collection sheets, and Google Hangout conference system. For behavior definition and data collection, the behavior definition of running was a running episode was defined as any continuous run at a speed faster than a brisk walk. This was 4 miles per hour. The data collection, we used the Nike Run Club app to track the distance in miles of the participants' run. Participants were able to see each other's run on the Nike Run Club app. Also, the Nike Run Club app included a visual of the distance and the average speed for each running episode. For our design, we used a multiple baseline design across participants, an embedded chaining criterion design for intervention 2 was not necessary for our replication study. For the baseline phase, After a stability of running data was reached under the baseline conditions, the treatment was applied to one of the participants while baseline conditions remained for other participants. When criterion level of running data was reached for the first participant, the treatment was applied to another participant, and so on. The participants used the Nike Run Club app on their phones to track their running distance, but during the baseline phase, participants did not set any long-term or short-term goals. For treatment phase, following baseline, each participant met with their group members to set a short-term and long-term goal via Google Hangouts. The group members play the role of the researcher, which provided feedback, and they helped participants determine their goals. At the first meeting, the participants set a short-term goal for the week and a long-term goal for the end of the study. Participants ran 3 times per week and met via Google Hangouts for the feedback and goal setting, which was done once a week. During the feedback and goal setting meetings, the visual and verbal descriptive performance feedback of the running progress was discussed with the participant. To assess IOA, other running trackers were utilized. Map My Run app and Runtastic. 4 of the participants used Map My Run in conjunction with the Nike Club app, and 1 participant used the Nike Run Club app with Runtastic. Every participant took at least 20% of IOA data. The IOA was calculated using trial-by-trial IOA, which was number of trials, in this case sessions, agreement divided by total number of trials times 100, which would equal the total IOA percentage. For treatment fidelity, in order to ensure treatment fidelity, we implemented the following. We had a clear operational definition, a checklist to evaluate the implementation of the treatment step by step. We provided training and practice implementing the treatment. IOA treatment fidelity was calculated by dividing the number of steps completed by the total number of steps. Next, we're going to have Marissa discuss the results of the project.
So the results for our replication study showed that all 5 participants who received the intervention had an increase in their running distance. As for short-term goals, all 5 participants met 100% of their running session opportunities. All 5 participants also met their long-term goal. In terms of IOA, IOA was calculated at 100% IOA for at least 20% during baseline and at least 20% during intervention for all of the participants. Treatment fidelity was also 100% for all 5 participants during the baseline and the intervention phases. Next, we're going to show the graph for each participant. First is Elizabeth. The results from Elizabeth's graph show that her running distance increased from a mean of 0.05 miles during baseline to a mean of 0.87 miles during treatment. Weekly short-term goals were set for Elizabeth, and her goals were 0.6 miles, 0.7 miles, 0.8 miles, 0.9 miles, 1 mile, and these goals were met on 100% of opportunities. Her long-term goal was 1 mile, which was achieved the last week of her intervention, and it was met at 100% criteria. Next is Becca. The results from Becca's graph show that running distance increased from a mean of 0.43 miles during baseline to a mean of 0.87 miles during treatment. Weekly short-term goals were set for Becca, and her goals were 0.6 miles, 0.7 miles, 0.8 miles, 0.9 miles, and 1 mile. And these goals were met on 100% of opportunities. Becca's long-term goal was 1 mile, and she achieved her long-term goal the last week of intervention and met at 100% criteria. Next is Ramsey. The results from Ramsey's graph show that running distance increased from a mean of 0.76 miles during baseline to a mean of 1.08 miles during treatment. Weekly short-term goals were set for Ramsey, and her goals were 0.9 miles, 1 mile, 1.10 miles, 1.20 miles, and these goals were met on 100% of opportunities. Her long-term goal was 1.2 miles, which was achieved the last week of her intervention and was met at 100% criteria. Next is Marissa. The results from Marissa's graph show that running distance increased from a mean of 0.19 miles during baseline to a mean of 0.29 miles during the treatment phase. Weekly short-term goals were set for Marissa, and her goals were 0.2 miles, 0.3 miles, 0.5 miles, and these goals were met on 100% of opportunities. Her long-term goal was 0.5 miles, which was achieved by the last week of intervention and was met at 100% criteria. Next is Laura. The results from Laura's graph show that running distance increased from a mean of 0.23 during baseline to a mean of 0.46 miles during treatment. Weekly short-term goals were set for Laura, and her goals were 0.4 miles and 0.5 miles, and these goals were met on 100% of opportunities. Her long-term goal was 0.5 miles, which was achieved the last week of intervention and was met at 100% criteria. We will now show all the participants' graphs combined. Our graph is a multiple baseline design across participants. The graph shows baseline data and when intervention was applied for each of the participants. Results showed that Elizabeth, Becca, Ramsey, Marissa, and Laura all increased their running distance in terms of miles. Overall, this graph shows the use of how goal setting and performance feedback helped increase running distance for all the adult participants, therefore showing a functional relationship between running distance, goal setting, and performance feedback. Next, Ramsey will talk about the limitations of our study.
So as Marissa just mentioned, I will be discussing the limitations of our study. To begin, one limitation of the study was that we had to make the study shorter for the purpose of time. Participants of the original study had 16 weeks of baseline and intervention running phases, whereas our study consisted of only 7 total weeks of baseline and intervention phases. This limitation in particular could have effects on the internal validity of the study. The less data collected means more room for possible error and less reliability. Another limitation of our study would be that there was no intervention in place to assess generalization after the study was complete. So once we completed our goal and stopped taking data, there was nothing set up to show if the participants continued to exercise by running on a weekly basis without the intervention in place. In reference to methods of the study, A limitation of the data collection techniques would be the difference in phone that was used between the participants. So all participants used the same applications, the Map My Run and Nike Run Club. However, not all participants use the same recording device. Some of us used an iPhone and some of us were using an Android device. This particularly could affect the reliability of the data since different phones could record data in a different way on the apps themselves. Although all participants used the same applications, the recording applications were different than the original study's use of the Nike sports bands. This was due to monetary purposes. Not all participants would be able to purchase a Nike sports band when we began our study. Therefore, a free app on everyone's phone was used instead. In the original study, there was one researcher that met with all of the participants on a weekly basis and reviewed the goals, gave the feedback to all of the participants. It was a little bit different in our study. We had to switch off between participants to be the researcher and give the feedback. This could be seen as a limitation because of the change of researcher, as different people just have different feedback techniques. So someone may seem more encouraging or more motivating in their feedback than others. Therefore, that could affect goal progression depending on who was receiving what feedback. A final limitation to the study is that some participants ran indoors and some are running outdoors. This was due to access to an inside gym or lack of weather consistency between the various states where the participants lived. This could be a limitation for having accuracy across participants and the ability to run different lengths depending on the track they were running on, incline, all of that could be involved. So to summarize, the purpose of the original study was to increase running distance amongst healthy adults through goal setting and performance feedback. The purpose of our study was to replicate the original study by Wack, Crossland, and Miltenberger and evaluate the use of goal setting and performance feedback to help increase running distance amongst healthy adults. Running distance was targeted due to the research benefits of regular exercise for adults. The methods of the study included 5 female grad students under the age of 31 who ran inside or outside at least 3 times a week to hit their weekly running goals. The women used Map My Run, Nike Run app, and an iPhone or an Android for data collection. A running episode was defined as any continuous run at a faster speed than a brisk walk, which would be 4 miles per hour. All members of the group met on a weekly basis via video chat using Google Hangout to go over previous week's progress, give individual feedback, and set short-term goals. A multiple baseline and changing criterion design was used to represent the data collected during the study. To go over the results, all 5 participants in the study met both their short-term and their long-term goals when the independent variable, which was the intervention, was added to the study. IOA was calculated for at least 20% of each participant's baseline and intervention phases, and treatment fidelity was calculated at 100% during both baseline and intervention phases. In conclusion, all participants of the study were able to meet their weekly and their long-term goals using goal setting and performance feedback strategies. All references that we used on this research project can be found on the remaining slides. This will conclude our presentation. Thank you for everybody who watched, and we hope you enjoyed it.